Imagine this, you need to send a simple text. Maybe it's to a friend, maybe it's for work, maybe you're just trying to ask a simple question. You type it out, but something feels off, so you tweak it. Then tweak it again, then delete half of it, then rewrite it, then just stare at it. And now it's been 5 minutes, then 10, then you never send it. Sound familiar? That's overthinking in action. Your brain hijacks itself, running simulation after simulation, and instead of making a decision, you get stuck. But what if I told you this isn't actually a flaw? What if your ability to overthink, your ability to anticipate, analyse and break things down into details that no one else sees, was actually a superpower? See, the problem isn't that you think too much. The problem is no one ever taught you how to think the right way. Because being an overthinker, that's like having a supercharged engine with no drivetrain attached, all that power, all that potential, but no way to use it. You're revving at full throttle, but instead of moving forward, you're just burning fuel and going nowhere. But once you learn how to steer that power, once you channel all that thinking into strategy instead of spirals, that's when it stops being a burden and starts becoming your greatest weapon. That's what we're fixing today. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your brain overthinks, how science and scripture prove it's not a flaw, and how to turn it into a skill that makes you sharper, more decisive, and more at peace. And we're doing it all while building an insanely efficient redstone storage system, with a hidden room, because some thoughts aren't meant to be seen on the surface. Also, I need your help. If you learn even one thing that changes how you see your mind, or think this was a good message other people should hear, promise me you'll hit that subscribe button. It's genuinely the most important thing for small creators like me. Maybe even comment and like if you really enjoyed it. Thank you for being here. You are the reason I do this. All right, let's get into it. Have you ever just known something was off? Walked into a room and immediately sensed tension? Or met someone and just felt like you shouldn't trust them, even when nothing obvious was wrong? That's intuition. And whether you realise it or not, that's a form of overthinking happening in the background. See, your brain is an information processing machine. It's constantly analysing patterns, behaviours, tiny details that your conscious mind doesn't even notice. Overthinkers? They just have an overpowered version of this system. Your brain is scanning, running simulations, making predictions, which is why you can see 10 different ways something might go wrong before most people even realise there's a decision to be made. And this isn't just some random quirk, it's how God designed the mind. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for deep thought, planning, and predicting outcomes, is what allows you to see ahead, anticipate danger, and make strategic decisions. It's the reason overthinkers tend to be more cautious, more analytical, and better at spotting potential problems before they happen. And the Bible actually backs this up. Proverbs 22:3. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. That word prudent, it doesn't mean fearful, it means calculated, strategic. God wired your brain to detect patterns and anticipate danger so you don't walk blindly into bad situations. The problem isn't that you think too much. The problem is when your thinking turns into indecision and fear instead of action. Because here's where overthinking goes wrong. Your brain is a prediction engine, but if you never tell it when to stop calculating and start moving, it just loops forever. Ever had this happen? You start thinking about a decision, then you think about every possible outcome. Then you start questioning those outcomes. Then you start questioning your own ability to decide. And now you're stuck because you don't trust your own intuition anymore. See, intuition is just overthinking that's been trained to work efficiently. It's the automatic version of deep thinking. When you see a pro athlete make a split-second move, or a master chess player make the right move without hesitation, that's not luck. That's because they've trained their brain to process thousands of details so fast that it looks effortless. The solution isn't to stop overthinking, it's to train it. So how do you do that? Set a mental time limit. If your brain is stuck in an overthinking loop, force yourself to make a decision within a set time. Even if it's small, taking action is what breaks the cycle. Start trusting your gut again. Your intuition isn't random, it's built from real experience and data. If you feel something is off, don't ignore it, but act on it with wisdom. Use thinking as a tool, not a prison. Overthinking is a strength when it leads to better plans and clearer decisions. But when it keeps you stuck, it's no longer thinking. It's just fear in disguise. Now let's bring this back to Minecraft. If you've ever tried to build a storage system without a plan, you know the pain. Chests everywhere, items scattered, no sense of organisation. And the moment you need something, you have no idea where to find it. But when you trust your planning ability, create a clear structure, and commit to a system, suddenly everything is smooth, efficient, and automatic. You don't have to overthink where things go, you just act. And that's exactly how your brain should work. Trained, structured, controlled. You ever lay down at night, ready to sleep, but instead of drifting off, your brain decides it's time to replay every awkward moment you've ever had since childhood? Or maybe you're in the shower trying to relax, and suddenly your brain starts crafting entire fake arguments, ones you'll never even have. That's not random, that's your default mode network, DMN, at work. The DMN is your brain's background processing system. It's what turns on when you're not actively doing anything. Scientists used to think your brain rested when you rested, but it turns out your brain never stops. The moment you stop focusing on something specific, the DMN kicks in, running through past events, scanning future possibilities, and connecting ideas. It's your brain's way of helping you make sense of the world. And here's where things get wild. People who are highly creative, highly intelligent, or deeply introspective tend to have the most active DMNs. Which means if you struggle with overthinking, your brain is actually more powerful than most people's. But there's a catch. Without direction, the DMN doesn't default to peace. It defaults to worry, regret, and fear. Instead of processing helpful information, you obsess over what you can't change. Instead of planning wisely, you play out the worst-case scenario over and over again. Instead of making peace with the past, you replay mistakes that no one even remembers but you. And this is exactly why the Bible tells us, Philippians 4:8, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, think about such things. Because if you don't direct your thoughts will direct you. See, overthinking isn't the problem. The problem is when you let your mind wander without guidance. So how do you break the cycle? Interrupt the loop. If your brain is stuck in a spiral, don't try to shut it off. Give it something new to focus on. Simple activities like walking, cleaning, or even journaling force your brain to shift gears and break out of the endless loop. Replace the noise with something solid. Meditation isn't about emptying your mind, it's about filling it with truth. When anxious thoughts start circling, ask yourself, is this real or is this just fear talking? Actively choose to think about what's good, what's true, and what actually matters. Recognise when thinking becomes useless. There's a difference between processing and obsessing. Ask yourself, is this thought helping me move forward, or is it just keeping me stuck? If it's not leading to action or growth, it's just noise. At the end of the day, your mind is like a powerful engine. If you don't give it direction, it'll just run wild. But if you learn to train it, redirect it, and use it intentionally, that's when overthinking stops being a curse and starts becoming your greatest weapon. Ever been in a situation where you just had to know the outcome before making a move? Maybe you held off on applying for a job because you weren't 100% sure you'd get it. Or maybe you didn't tell someone how you really felt because you didn't know how they'd respond. Maybe you've spent days, weeks, or even months overanalyzing a decision, waiting for that one perfect moment of clarity. But it never came. That's because your brain is hardwired to crave certainty. This happens because of dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation and reward. See, your brain releases dopamine when it finds answers, when it solves a problem, completes a task, or figures something out. And because it loves that dopamine hit, your brain starts obsessing over finding the right answer before it lets you move forward. This is why overthinkers get stuck. You don't apply because you don't want to risk rejection. You don't speak up because you don't know exactly how it will go. You don't act because you're waiting for absolute certainty, a guarantee that everything will work out. But here's the truth, that certainty you're waiting for, it's never coming. Because life doesn't work that way. And this is exactly why the Bible tells us, 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we live by faith, not by sight. Faith means moving forward even when you don't have all the answers. It means understanding that you won't always see the full picture. But that shouldn't stop you from making the next move. And here's what most people don't realise. Faith and overthinking are complete opposites. Overthinking says, I need to know the whole path before I take a step. Faith says, take the step and the path will reveal itself. Overthinking demands control, but faith demands trust. So how do you stop waiting for perfect certainty and start moving forward? Redefine failure. The fear of getting it wrong is what keeps most people stuck. But failure isn't a dead end, it's just data. Every mistake teaches you something new, and the only real failure is refusing to try. Act before you feel ready. Overthinkers wait for a moment of perfect confidence before making a decision, but confidence comes from action, not before it. The more you move forward without certainty, the easier it becomes. Trust that clarity comes with movement. Some answers only reveal themselves after you start. If you wait until you have every detail figured out, you'll spend your whole life on pause. At the end of the day, overthinking keeps you stuck in analysis mode, waiting for a certainty that will never come. But faith? Faith teaches you to move anyway, to trust, and to step forward even when you don't have the whole picture. And that's the real secret. You don't need certainty, you just need courage. Ever notice that when you are exhausted, your overthinking goes into overdrive? Suddenly small problems feel like the end of the world. Conversations that didn't bother you yesterday now feel personal. Every decision feels 10 times harder, like your brain is lagging but still refusing to shut off. That's because lack of sleep makes overthinking worse. See, your brain has 2 major systems battling for control. The prefrontal cortex. This is your rational, logical, decision-making part of the brain. It helps you weigh options, think critically, and make good choices. The amygdala. This is your emotional and survival center. It's responsible for fear, stress, and quick reactions. When you're well rested, your PFC keeps everything in check. You can think clearly, manage emotions, and make rational choices. But when you're sleep deprived, the balance flips. Your amygdala takes over, making you more reactive, more emotional, and way more prone to spiraling thoughts. And the research backs this up. People who don't get enough sleep have increased anxiety, difficulty making decisions, and a harder time regulating emotions. Which is exactly why overthinking seems to get 10 times worse at night. You're not actually gaining clarity. You're just running in circles because your brain isn't functioning at full power. And this is why Jesus himself made rest a priority. Mark 4:38. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples were freaking out because their boat was caught in a violent storm. The waves were crashing, the wind was howling, and they thought they were about to die. And what was Jesus doing? Like sleeping. Not because he didn't care, but because he understood something they didn't. Panic doesn't solve problems, but rest gives you the strength to face them. If you've ever stayed up overthinking, running worst-case scenarios through your head at 3 a.m, this is your reminder. Your brain isn't built to handle everything at once. Sometimes the best thing you can do is shut it down and come back stronger. So how do you stop sleep deprivation from fueling your overthinking? Set a hard cutoff for decision-making. If you're exhausted and spiraling, stop forcing yourself to solve problems at night. Make it a rule. If it's after a certain time, you're not making any major decisions. Give your brain an off-ramp. If your thoughts won't stop racing, don't just try to sleep. Write them down. Studies show that journaling before bed can actually help your brain process worries faster, so it doesn't keep looping them while you sleep. Treat rest as a strategy, not a luxury. Rest isn't just about avoiding burnout. It's about making your mind sharper, clearer, and more effective. If Jesus could sleep in the middle of a storm, you can give yourself permission to rest too. At the end of the day, overthinking and exhaustion go hand in hand. If you're not resting, you're not thinking, you're just spiraling. And sometimes the best way to stop overthinking isn't to figure everything out. It's to close your eyes and let your brain reset. So here's the truth. Your ability to overthink isn't a weakness. It's not something to fight against or shut off. It's a tool, one that can either work for you or work against you. Overthinkers aren't broken. They're strategists, deep thinkers, pattern recognizers. The problem isn't that you think too much. The problem is when your thoughts stay in a loop instead of leading to action. You now know that your brain is designed to process deeply, but it needs direction. You now know that your thoughts will spiral if you don't actively guide them. You now know that certainty isn't coming, and waiting for it will only keep you stuck. And you now know that sometimes the smartest thing you can do is step away, rest, and let your mind reset. At the end of the day, overthinking's just overpowered thinking without structure. And the good news, you get to control that structure. So here's what I want you to do. Drop a comment and tell me, what's one thing you've overthought recently? Whether it's something big or something stupid, just type it out. You might realise you're not alone in this. And if this video helped, even just a little bit, hit that subscribe button. Because this is just the beginning. Alright, now go use that brain of yours for something great.